This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
What up, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. Your Indiana Pacers win the season series against the Detroit Pistons with a 133-119 victory in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, thanks to the amazing play of Pascal Siakam with 37 points on 15 of 21 shooting, and Tyrese Haliburton with 30 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds. And here to talk with me about this win is the one and only Michael J. Facci. Facci, this was a game to watch.
This was high quality entertainment. This was like a reality TV show, drama, whatever you want to call it. It had the highs, it had the lows. It was chippy, but in the end, it was Indiana that never backed down. Dude, they looked dominant at times. At other times, they couldn't keep Detroit down. Detroit was always within reach. But this was an awesome game where I felt like the Pacers could have had the rust from coming back from Europe. They were without Benedict Mather and Andrew Nembhard, and they made no excuses. They get it done, 133-119.
Yeah, we should just clarify real quick that Ben Mathurin was added late to the injury report as around 4:30 when the Pacers posted it. He did end up having an illness, and the Pacers decided to hold him out of this game. He was not at tonight's game. I did not see him on the bench. And, of course, Andrew Nembhard with that thoracic spine injury. It's basically, I was talking to Dustin Dopirik about it, beat writer for the Indy Star, and he said it's really not as bad as you think. It's just a wordy name, a scientific name for it. So Rick Carlisle seemed kind of optimistic that both guys could be back for the Hawks game on Saturday. So we'll see how that goes. But in their stead, Aaron Nesmith gets to start, plays his first game of like significant heavy minutes, 32 minutes in this one. Ben Shepherd had 33 minutes in this game, and so thought all of those guys did well, and Jarris Walker played 21 minutes tonight, and Rick Carlisle alluded to the fact that those three guys were kind of the story of this game, despite all the big points from your big three here in Indiana. The fact that those three guys defended at such a high level against some of the better players of the Detroit Pistons was huge. But I disagree with Rick Carlisle. I think that what Pascal Siakam did tonight has to be the starting point for this conversation.
Yeah, look, we can give shout-outs, tips of the hats, whatever you want to call it, to some of the, not to say role players, but guys who stepped up in the absence of Nembhard and Mathurin. But Pascal Siakam, I mean, this is putting the cherry on top. Maybe, the final icing on trying to be an all-star. They're going to name all-stars probably when you're...
The vote's already in, so it doesn't matter at this point.
Okay, well, whatever it is, this is the last impression before we find out, if he's an all-star or not. And he brought his A game. I mean, we've talked about it. It's crazy. He didn't have a 30-point game this season. To be averaging about 20 points per game and not have a 30-point game, it's unheard of. But he drops 37 points, and he had it going early on. He started, whether Rick said it was either 7 of 7 or 8 of 8. He was on fire to start the game. I know he was 8 of 9 at halftime. Finishes 15 of 21. Some of the shots that he was hitting were just so smooth. Those turnarounds that he loves, those mid-range jumpers. He was fantastic tonight. We always have that fear. Are they going to go away from him in the second half? They did not. He delivered throughout this game.
Yeah, he was awesome. And at one point, he was stuck at 28 points for a little while there. Finally broke that in the fourth quarter, which was great to see. They really needed that. So he scored 9 points in that fourth quarter. And you could tell he was just kind of cooking. He realized that Detroit had nobody that could guard him. And I think even Pistons fans realized, okay, this is a guy that is getting buckets and we have no stop for him. So It's tough. I mean, that's the reason why the Pacers went out and got Pascal Siakam last year. It's because this guy is a walking bucket when he wants to be. And the Pacers have been on the wrong end of that for so many years trying to guard Siakam. He just hits hellacious shot after hellacious shot in the mid-range. And it's a beautiful thing to watch because he was just feeling it. Like, he had a massive dunk in the first quarter that was just phenomenal. You could kind of tell like he really got up for it. So one of those things where you just realize, like, okay, Pascal's feeling it tonight. I mean, this Pacers team was on fire to start the game. They were up 18-4 at one point. Obviously, Detroit kept chipping away and things, like you said earlier, like the Pistons would not go away. They were just hanging around. But, Pascal Siakam, to me, was the reason why the Pacers continued to kind of just push that lead out every single time, it felt like, because he would just hit big buckets over whoever they were trying to throw at him defensively. And you got to give it to him. I mean, Tyrese said a post game, he should have had a 40-point game. Like, that's how good he was in this game. And honestly, they needed it because this was a game that was a little bit too close. In my opinion, the Pacers should have been much, much more locked in defensively from quarters 1 through 3. But I think they did lock in the fourth quarter, finally holding Detroit under 30 points. and looked like a much better team out there defensively in the fourth, but they needed to see a little bit more defensive uptick, in my opinion, in quarters 1 through 3.
Yeah, it's true because they were dominant in the first. They shot 80% in the first quarter. They led by as many as 20. And then all of a sudden, it's like at the end of that quarter, you're only up 7. So you drop 40, which is always great, but you give up 33. It's like, okay, so we went from dominant to like, wait, is Detroit like still alive? And this, and Detroit played a much better, second quarter. Pacers still led by 10. You had, Siakam had, I think it was 21, and then Haliburton had 22 at halftime. Those two were fantastic. McConnell had a really good first half, but before we get to McConnell, Haliburton, it looked early on that like he had it going.
Yeah.
He had it going. It was great. Anytime you're getting 22 points at halftime for a guy like Tyrese Haliburton, you just know he's in the zone. Usually a little bit of a late starter. That was not the case. Those two were just taking it to Detroit in that first half, and I feel like they remained consistent. I mentioned, obviously, if Haliburton had 22 in the first half, it means he only had 8 in the second half, but some of those shots down the stretch were big. And we got to talk about it a little bit early on, how, like, we're picking up where we left off against Detroit. That was a chippy game last time. A lot of things were said. Beef Stew, talking about Miles Turner and saying, don't you like to play Legos? Yes, he loves Legos. He does. That's who he is, and he's not going to run from that. But I also feel like we got to talk about Isaiah Stewart, boneheaded move early on. I think that kind of set the tone in this game, though, for just nonstop chippiness. I think the Pacers honestly thrived off it tonight.
No, I mean, I think honestly, like, this is a Detroit team that is very, like, loud.
Yep.
And JB Bickerstaff, to me, I like JB Bickerstaff. I've said that
Had a back
before.
tonight.
I think he's a really, good coach, and I like that he's a little feisty, but, like, you could just tell, like, he was being feisty tonight with what he was saying out there. Like, he got a technical foul.
Yep.
Tim Hardaway Jr. got a technical foul in the fourth quarter. Miles Turner
Yep.
got a technical foul in the fourth quarter or it might have been third
Turner got
quarter. Like,
ejected.
Malik Beasley walked up to him. But, I mean,
That was
honestly,
weird that he grabbed him, though. Like, first I was like, oh, are they playing around a little bit? Because, like, Turner grabbed him around the waist, and I was like, this is interesting. Like,
yeah.
my wife's like, oh, maybe they're friends. I'm like, they're not friends. No, like, this, this is different, babe. You're wrong here. But this was like, I was just wondering, I was surprised that he, like, kind of grabbed him around the waist.
Yeah, it was a little bit interesting to me. I mean, from my vantage point, like, it was so far away. It looked like you said, oh, are they just like, is he just like saying something to him, like, making sure he's good? But I don't know. It's just kind of a weird. I didn't really feel like it was worthy of a technical foul. I don't know if there was something that was said that maybe caused it, but based on the replay, I didn't see a whole lot. But the Isaiah Stewart stuff, like, you could just tell, like, when he immediately walked into the game to go to the free throw line, he was like trying to pick a fight with James Johnson, who's the Pacers enforcer on the bench, and you just knew at this point. Like, I think Jeremiah Johnson summed it up best, best on his tweet. He was like, Isaiah Stewart didn't come to play basketball; he came to pick a fight tonight.
Yes.
And after all that, it was so interesting because last night we just interviewed Tom Crean. And what did Tom Crean say about Thomas Bryant?
So much credit. Oh, the old Thomas Bryant would have responded. I loved how he kept his composure. Well, things are a little bit different tonight.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, he deserved to be rightfully mad. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of funny because I don't know if you noticed or not, but Pacers, like, their head security guys were out there as well as the assistant coaches like Lloyd Pierce and guys like that. But they were really just trying to, like, keep this from escalating into something more. And the funny part was I noticed that the Pacers head of security kind of had a smirk on his face. Like, like, what are we doing here? Like, Thomas Bryant was hot, and Isaiah Stewart ended up getting a flagrant foul because he threw like a 2 forearm shove to his neck area, like, just completely unnecessary. And I mean, honestly, he was so bad tonight on the court. Isaiah Stewart, the Pacers were doing better when he was out there on the floor. So him getting ejected actually helped the Pistons as a basketball team. And, the theatrics weren't nearly as big there, but, like, just that first technical foul that he got as he was chirping with the Pacers bench, like, the Pistons went on like a small little run. Carlisle calls a timeout. Beef Stew kind of like meanders his way down to the Pacers bench, starts talking with James Johnson. They both get double text. It's just like, look, I like it. I like the chippiness. I like Isaiah Stewart's chippiness. I think that it's like a real thing. Like, with Isaiah Stewart, like, I know that people are going to say, like, he's a hold me back kind of guy. Like, this is the same dude that was, like, chasing LeBron.
He wanted blood. I mean, he was bleeding, I think, at the moment. But it was like, look, he's got kind of a reputation as that guy. And I think you were right when you said, same with JJ's tweet, he came here looking for a revenge or something to set the tone early on, but he was an idiot about it. Like, don't get yourself thrown out early on. The Pistons, you said, I know they weren't playing good with him, but I'm sure there was at times they could have used him in what was, a single digit game, at some point in the fourth quarter, definitely in the third quarter. So I feel like for the Pistons, like, they are an improved team. They are. But the Pacers won the season series 3-1. I put out a tweet there saying, calling them like our little brother this year, because I feel like this is what it was like when, they want to get noticed. Last year, we wanted to get noticed against Milwaukee. The problem is we won the season series against Milwaukee. Detroit's trying to get noticed. They played one really good game against the Pacers, and that's it. So it's like, hey, you're not there yet. You got some room to grow, but I think this is a team that we will be, like, this rivalry feels like it's coming back a little bit. And it had been quiet and dead for quite some time, but those of you that have been following this team for a while, in the early 2000s, I mean, this was as real as it got between the Pacers and the Pistons, and it feels like there was almost like I don't want to call it 20 years, but I feel like a good 15 years where this rivalry really didn't mean that much.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell Rick Carlisle was really trying to downplay this. He just said it's a division, right? It's a division game. It's a division game. Look, I mean, well, I don't see very much of this with the Bulls. I don't see very much of this with the Cavaliers. We saw a little bit with the Bucks last year, right? And it really wasn't that big of a deal until Giannis freaked out about the game ball. And, so like it's just funny, but I thought Tyrese post game brought up a good point. He said, I'm not calling our rivalry with the Bucks our rivalry until we play in the playoffs. Same with the Knicks. If we don't play in the playoffs, it's not a rivalry. So he kind of laid that out there, and the Pacers played both those teams, and he just basically said, okay, Detroit, ball's in your court now. So we'll see if this comes to backfire on Tyrese at all a little bit. If, it's really early still in terms of the standings and where things are at, but you never know what'll happen. But I mean, this Detroit team, I think they are a few pieces away from really being, considered a legitimate, playoff contender. But I will say this, like you brought it up, like last year, like this Pacers team, and they were like really going for the Bucks, right? And the Bucks were kind of like the big brother to the Pacers. Yep. Pacers had a really hard time beating them, but last year they did it. And so they were talking a lot more because they did it. This year, it's kind of like, had Detroit beat the Pacers 3-1, then they could be talking more. But
absolutely,
it would be like if the Pacers went 3 games, lost 3 games to the Bucks last year, and only won 1, and still thought they were like in a rivalry with the Bucks. It's like, no, you're not. So Detroit, this is not a rivalry yet. I would agree with Tyrese. I mean, yeah, there's some chippiness here. There's some bad blood, I guess you could call it. But Isaiah Stewart, it was just absolutely reckless tonight. Like really just stupid. And honestly, like I'll be interested to see if there's anything else that comes from this ejection, because he did slap Tyler Ford's hands away when he did originally call the foul on him. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but there was a couple of times where he pointed down to the Pacers bench.
Yeah, with
a little air gun shooting.
Exactly. So I think something's coming. I mean, look, if Mathurin got suspended for a game last time, his was way worse. I mean, way less is what I meant. Not worse.
I mean, he pushed an official. I mean,
yeah. No.
You put your hands on an official, it's exactly. An automatic suspension.
That's what I'm at. If that's what the rule is, then you call it consistently. Because Mathurin's was, you can't put hands on an official. You can't. I think Isaiah Stewart went just a little wild tonight, and I would imagine this could be, if not a 1-game suspension, definitely a fine. So probably both. But either way, this was a game that I think that Indiana, it was great to show that there's not going to be this rust from maybe not playing every other day or anything like that. They'd had some rest, but they just went in January 10-2. That's the best record in the league in January. Fantastic basketball is being played by Indiana. Season high 6 games above 500. I mean, they shoot 57% basically from the field, 50% from 3, 19-38. I mean, this game had a little bit of everything in this, but like if you can win these type of games, look, Detroit's no slouch. They were a 500 team coming into this game. You can win these games without 2 starters. To me, this feels like a different mentality than the Pacers team that we saw last year that, might overlook some teams or anything of the sort. Like, they were ready to rock tonight. It showed from the first quarter, and they kept it going throughout.
Yeah, I mean, if you really combine this game in terms of like that second half that Tyrese played, he only played in that third quarter against the Spurs. He had 18 points. And then that first half tonight that he had 22 points. That's 40 points in 3 quarters for Tyrese. So Tyrese offensively is really starting to find himself. You could feel the confidence from him. The 8 assists was really good. That's about his average this year. 7 rebounds, which was tied for a team high with Miles Turner. So he was just really active out there tonight. You could kind of tell. And I think where the jet lag might have been a thing, I think that this being their opponent definitely helped shift a little bit of that jet lag into like, back of the mind type thing. And let's be honest. the Pacers, like you mentioned, they let this game get way too close in the fourth quarter. It was really nerve wracking there when uh, Tobias Harris was just absolutely cooking Obi Toppin. Like Obi Toppin was not good
Not a
in
good
this
game.
game.
Yes. No.
I mean, yeah. Well, congratulations to Obi Toppin for the engagement, but a minus 18 in this game when you win by 14 points, and then Pascal Siakam's a plus 32. Like, basically, swap those two guys out, and that's where the 14-point differential is right there. So, it just when Obi was on the floor, they absolutely cooked, and Tobias Harris was unbelievable. Now, I will say this: if you look at Tobias's box score, you're probably thinking like pretty good game from him. But I don't know how many wide open threes he missed in the fourth quarter that just saved the Pacers. The Pacers had awful defense in that fourth quarter. And, we hear a lot of guys say like it's a make or miss league. Like, I don't remember how many times I saw Tobias Harris, clank a three when he was wide open with nobody within like 5 feet from him. So I do give, Obi Toppin a little bit of slack here just because like Tobias Harris is good in the mid range, but the Pacers defense caught a big break here from Toby missing some big shots.
Yeah, I don't know if it's either Tobias Harris or it might have been Ron Holland, but like someone airballed a three, kind of like late in like in the fourth, and I was like, "Oh, this is just getting ugly out here for Detroit." But here's the difference between like Obi Toppin was a minus 18. He didn't even put a shot up, which is feels kind of hard to do because it's not like he was all taking bad shots or anything, but minus 18 regardless. Aaron Nesmith didn't make a shot, plus 20. I mean, that is just a huge difference. Both players didn't contribute anything offensively. They both scored 0, and there's a massive difference in the plus minus between the two of them. So Aaron Nesmith, I think this was great to have him back because I think if you look at this team, if they didn't have Mathurin, they didn't have Nembhard, they didn't have Nesmith, they're getting just way too thin, way too thin. So yeah, to Carlisle's point, those guys did step up. I felt like Turner was another guy who stepped up in this game. He was good early on. He had 11 points in the first half. He had 13 in the second half. He had 8 in the fourth. So it was just Turner was someone that had it going on 4 of 6 from 3, got to the free throw line for 12 attempts, hit 10 of them. He went 10 of 12 when at one point this Pacers team couldn't hit a free throw. They were 1 of 9 to start the game from a free throw line. I was like, what?
That's so bad.
Like, yeah, that's little things like that keep the Pistons in this game. But yeah, I just think that your big three that you expect coming into this year of Haliburton, Siakam, Turner, they absolutely delivered tonight.
No, they did. And I will say this, like there were some weird combinations out there early in the first half. Pacers got up to a big lead, and they went to more of a bench unit lineup where it was T.J. McConnell, Jarris Walker, Obi Toppin, and Thomas Bryant with Johnny Furphy. And so it's like Johnny Furphy's getting minutes. Like, oh boy, like and nothing against Johnny, but it's just like at this point right now, like this is a game where you don't want to, take your foot off the gas at all. And I felt like during that stretch, T.J. McConnell really lifted the Pacers offensively. Yeah. There was some massive stuff he did in that first quarter, even in the second quarter. Like I don't think he had a great second half offensively, but
in the second half.
Yeah, I was gonna say he felt really quiet, but in that first half, he really did kind of carry that bench unit and had some really big buckets. So kudos to him. But yeah, honestly, like if I go back and kind of replay some of the biggest shots in this game, I will just say this: Ben Shepherd from 3 hit some massive daggers. Every time Detroit would get within like 4 points, here came a Ben Shepherd 3. I know he went 4 of 6 from 3, I believe. And then there was another one that was massive too when Thomas Bryant got the pick and the pop. And he drilled a 3, and then he looked at the Detroit bench and started barking. I mean, I've said it plenty of times on this podcast, but like the addition of Thomas Bryant, I don't even care what the price was for. I just think the fact that you got this type of player as your backup big, it is so much fun to watch. I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, in an on-court production standpoint, like this is the best bang for your buck you're going to get in a backup center.
100%. You almost feel like we owe Miami something. Like we should send them like a basket of fruit or something. I don't want to send another pick, but at this point, I just feel like the Thomas Bryant edition, it's been awesome. The energy he brings, the play that he brings. I mean, just 9 points, 17 minutes, but just goes far more than anything that he's contributing in a box score standpoint. But I think Johnny Furphy was someone who was coming off of a really good G League game. Maybe they thought, hey, you know what? Maybe he can hit some shots, anything like that. I know it didn't happen tonight, but I know he had a really good performance in the G League. I think he hit like four threes or more earlier today. But as a team, you got everything you hoped for, everything you wanted. I think it was great. Talking about those Ben Shepherd threes, Shepherd in the corner, it just felt like that was his spot. And I feel like on a night like tonight, he's one of those guys that just really stepped up into the starting lineup, gives you 12 points, that double-digit scoring, great classic Pacer basketball. You get 5 players at least in double-digit scoring, even when you're without 2 starters. Gotta love it. That is the season series against Detroit. So I think that this will die down a little bit for now. But this is a Pacers team right now, man. They are playing. I think they're playing basketball right now that makes me feel like almost like they're playing in the playoffs. Like just really good basketball where you don't want to peak too early, but I'm having a blast right now. And I wish this was a little bit later in the season, but all you can do is control who's on the schedule. And right now, Indiana is handling business.
No, they really are. It's been fun to watch this season, right? Well, I should say this part of the season, right? Because sitting here with with a 10-2 record in January, it's
Winnable
hard to
schedule
like.
coming up
I mean, you got the Hawks, and then
without
you go on a
Jalen
West Coast
Johnson.
road trip. Like this is
Yep,
the right time to kind of get your momentum going back, with where you left, and I think someone brought up a good point. It might have been young Simba on Twitter saying, the only 2 games the Pacers really have lost are these little mini series they had against Cleveland and San Antonio,
yep,
which, 90% of the time you do split those.
I
So
agree.
it's really just great to see how well they've been playing. They're top 10 in offense and defense, and like they're just
Crazy.
connecting. And Tyrese keeps, going back to saying like it's our defense that's winning us these games. And I think 23 points in the fourth quarter tonight just kind of shows you like when it comes down to crunch time, like the Pacers learned a lot last year, and I think they found out what kind of team they are. And I think we haven't really talked about it this much, and I should have asked Rick Carlisle about it, but it just kind of hit me right now. The new league rule changes that Carlisle said that they had to adjust to. I think it just took them some time to getting adjusted to how physical they can play, and I think they've been able to implement that with their defense. And obviously, getting healthy bodies back makes a big difference. But it's just really a good team right now, and they're really connecting. And Carlisle alluded to it in the pregame stuff when he said, "Yeah, we're without Nimhard and Matherin tonight, but that's why we have such a deep team." And so, while everybody has been talking about consolidation and things like that, it's nights like tonight where you can rely on Jarris Walker to be your backup wing defender for 23 minutes. And, Aaron Nesmith, while he had a great plus minus game, like he wasn't guarding Cade for the majority of the game. It was Ben Shepherd and then Jarris Walker. And Rick Carlisle said that he voted for Cade Cunningham to be an all-star reserve this year. And rightfully so. Cade Cunningham was awesome. He's been fantastic all season long, and the Pistons have completely turned their season around from last year. So, yeah, it's great. Like, this is a really exciting Pistons team on the up and coming, but, like, you got to give credit to a lot of these guys on the Pacers. So overall, Fletch, with this game in mind, I feel like the Pacers kind of weathered the silliness from, the back and forth bickering crap like that. Like it's entertaining to a certain degree, but at some point it also just kind of gets annoying. And I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, thank God, this is our last game with Detroit. I hope it doesn't get chippy again. Like, no, I like the chippiness, but I don't want someone to get hurt out there. And so I think that with Milwaukee and Indiana last year, you kind of knew like it's never going to escalate into anything crazy except for like what Pat Bev did. And Pat Bev ended up getting himself really like kicked out of the
Last game he ever
league.
played. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's when he comes back, I wonder if I'll have to serve that suspension. I'm sure he will.
Is he coming back? I don't know.
I'm just saying if he ever
Yeah.
does, like if it seems like I want to bring Pat Bev back, like he's gonna have to serve that suspension for throwing
It's
that ball at the
true.
fan after the game.
No, I know.
So it's just
Can't run from
interesting.
it.
But I will give you a fun stat here.
Yeah.
If you really like stats,
I do.
Malik Beasley has now played
Oh, this was a good one. I saw this.
15 games against the Pacers the last 2 seasons.
Ooh.
4-11 for Malik Beasley. He's lost 11 times to the Pacers in the last two seasons. That's got to be rough.
It's got to be rough. I'd be mad catching all those L's. And I know, he did Tyrese Haliburton did like the Malik Beasley, shake, a little shimmy shake, and I saw some Piston fans being rubbed wrong about that. And I get that. But to me, and we were talking about this offline, that was the Tyrese that we knew and loved and we've wanted to see all year. Like the joy was just so real. Someone was chirping at me on Twitter. It's like if your star player drops 30 points on really efficient shooting in a win, like if that's not the time to like take a little moment to celebrate, when is it? I don't ever want to see this guy dancing when we're losing. Like that's
so
not what you
dumb.
want for. So people are crazy. There's no way to have any fun anymore out there. I'm happy for Tyrese. I think it was awesome. I think these type of performances are just fantastic for him. But also, these type of wins, when you have to dig a little bit deeper, I feel like this just builds this team even closer. Like it brings them closer together because it's like, hey, we had a battle, we won. Wow, that's great. Let's take care of business. Let's keep this going. Like they're playing such good basketball now where I just feel like they're not overlooking those other opponents and letting their guard down at any times. Like they've been so much more consistent lately. And when I look at the schedule, we're talking about you're home against Atlanta. Like I mentioned before, no Jalen Johnson. Okay, now you got the trade deadline coming up soon. You're playing teams like Utah and Portland, who very well could be sellers. Very
Good
well.
point.
You might be able to pick up one or two wins over there, where maybe it's a depleted roster, anything of that sort. But either way, the Pacers on paper are better than both of those teams. They have an opportunity to really go on a run here, and I'm having a blast. I don't want it to end anytime soon. This is the team that we knew they were capable of being, and we're seeing it. And man, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like we were pretty negative about this team
We were.
because of how bad they were. Like 10 and 15 was
It
not
wasn't
good.
fun.
And the version of that team, I think, when we said they were a playing team, is a right opinion at that point.
Yes.
To believe that this team would then go on a 16-5 run the next 21 games, nobody would have expected that. So they're just slowly starting to pick up some momentum nationally in terms of like teams like or people talking about them like Brian Windhorst. But like part of that is because Brian Windhorst was in Paris, France, covering the games, right? So it's like if he's not there, do we really hear much about it? Like obviously, like Wemby put on a show against the Pacers, but even Windhorst, I thought was very right in his comments, saying like, "Look, I watch the Pacers play, and they are tough. Like you do not want to play that team in a 7-game series, no matter what team you are." And I think that's kind of where this is a unique Pacers team where you might not necessarily think of them as the better team on paper versus some of these heavy fighters or heavyweights here in the Eastern Conference, but. You just give the Pacers a chance. Like, just see what they did last year in New York. And I know everybody's going to be like, well, New York was hurt. It's like, well, the Pacers weren't fully healthy either.
Exactly.
And it's just, you went into Madison Square Garden in a Game 7 and completely blew the doors off of them. And I know that they ended up making a little bit of a comeback there before Jalen Brunson got hurt. But, like, still, like, the Pacers were in such control of that game for the majority of it. So
it was a historic Game 7 win, especially for a team on the road. So it was nothing short of historic. And I had a friend recently that goes, "Don't the Pacers stink this year?" And it's like, no, that was the first 20 games.
First impressions.
But that's what I'm saying. They last too long. Like I know this win over Detroit is not going to be the one that they cover on First Take or any ESPN show. That's not going to happen. But what it is, it's the little whispers of like, hey, yeah, have you seen the type of ball the Pacers are playing lately? Or like, hey, since the calendar's turned, like I think they have the best record in January. Like it's like we're starting to get that respect little bit, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time. So I'd be curious as you're heading into the trade deadline, does Indiana look to maybe say, maybe we got something going on? Do we look to add one little piece to it? It doesn't have to be a big thing, but have you seen enough to want to, get a buyout guy or, flip one of those James Wiseman or maybe even Isaiah Jackson contracts into something that could just give you a little bit of a boost? Or do you unfortunately say, hey, look, this team has everything they need. There's no reason to tinker with anything. I don't know. You can go either way, but I feel it's a good spot to be in right now that this team has chemistry. They're playing great, relatively healthy. I hope Andrew Nembhard, I wanted to say this before, I can't pronounce what that spine sprain is. Thoracic? What is it?
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Thoracic, I think, is the right word.
I mean, I could totally be wrong. Look, people might mistake my last name as Fauci. I am no doctor. I don't know how to pronounce that spine sprain right there. But I did go on Google and I did see how long does that take. And a mild sprain could be 1 to 2 weeks with proper rest. A moderate to severe could be anywhere between 4 to 16 weeks. I don't know the status of Andrew Nembhard. If you're telling me there's a chance maybe he could be back Saturday, even if you don't rush him and he's not back Saturday, maybe he's back Monday, and it will have been, just over a week or so, since he's played. Maybe, hopefully, it's on the milder side.
Yeah, I mean, the way Rick Carlisle kind of discussed it, it didn't seem like he was too concerned about it. It was more like, to me, a precautionary thing. And so, honestly, like he even mentioned, like, what kind of task this is, like, because if you go back and look at that game that the Pacers won in Detroit, the last one they played Game 3, as Haliburton referred to that. I mean, Andrew Nembhard had Cade Cunningham and Nimhel, right? And so It was beautiful to see, and not having him or Matherin, like two guys that have been playing much, much more pivotal roles on the defensive side of things this season. And you have to rely on your backup and Ben Shepherd and a guy that was once a starter in Aaron Nesmith, and then Jarris Walker, who's kind of like out of the 10-man rotation right now. Like to go out there and guard Cade for 48 minutes, like that's a tall task. And so they did a good job. Obviously, you want to have him back healthy, but we'll see. I'm not gonna like over freak out about it. I think they'll probably want him back to try to guard Trae Young and the Hawks, because like with Jalen Johnson being out, like this could become the Trae show. I have seen some interesting stuff where people are floating out the idea that maybe the Hawks could trade Trae Young now, that they're going to be in a little bit more of a seller mode with Johnson going down. Maybe you trade him out to Sacramento. Sacramento trades De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio, and San Antonio sends those picks back to Atlanta.
Well, the thing is, yeah, well, that would have to be a big part of it, because that their pick is unprotected and it is owed to San Antonio.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so look, if it's that very specific scenario, okay. If it's not, they don't want to trade Trae Young and give up, a top 3, top 5 pick, anything like that.
But it's not, they don't have it anyway, so it's like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you still want to do, it hurts to give up that tight. It's more of a motivation to let's push forward, because you don't want to give up,
a big pick.
Waste the rest of your season. But interesting stuff for the Hawks. They're in a little bit of trouble. Started hot, and now you could see maybe a team like Detroit is able to eventually get past Atlanta in the standings.
Let me ask you this: you think DeAndre Hunter is more available now?
I think he's probably less available. Less available.
Available now?
Well, I think they need him more than without Jalen Johnson.
But they're not going to be as good.
They're definitely not going to be, but are they willing to? Are they
going to be sellers? Would it be?
If they had their draft pick, I think they would be more likely to be sellers. But they don't. So
yeah, if they can get that draft pick back, I think that would make them more willing to be sellers elsewhere.
Yeah, sure. Because like Trae is the guy who's stopping them from probably a rebuild. Honestly, like you had the number 1 pick this past year. Yeah. But you still have other guys on that roster where you're like, well, we feel obligated to be stuck in the middle. If they could trade Trae Young, get enough to like start fresh, it would make a lot more sense.
And that's kind of what I was like hinting at there too. So it was funny because our good friend Tyler Smith, former original co-host of the show with us back in the day, he put out a funny tweet and like listed all the first overall picks like the last 5 years, and like he showed that the Atlanta Hawks got Zachary Ricochet, and I said, hey, look. In 2019, or whatever draft that was, they had Luka Doncic with the 3rd overall pick.
Yep.
That's who they took. They traded him for Trae Young, but I'm sure some Hawks fans would be like, we would do that trade 100 out of 100 times because they love some Trae stuff. But
they wouldn't believe it when their head hit the pillow at night, because Luka Doncic is going to be a historic player. But I think Atlanta's in a weird spot. I'm happy that we're not in that type of spot like we were a couple of years ago, where you're stuck in the mud of, you're good enough to maybe be a playoff team. You're not good enough to win it all. You're not bad enough to get the top pick. It's a tough spot to be in. And I don't envy them, because I love what we're going through right now. I want this to keep going. Pacers are playing great basketball right now, 26-20. We are on the Bucks' heels.
Half game back
of 4th place. Man, I did not think the Pacers season. We had a question. I think it was a mailbag or whatever. Could the Pacers finish as, I think, a top 6 seed? And when we talked about it, I was like, maybe 6. Yeah. And now all of a sudden we're talking about a run at potentially 4th and home court. A lot of basketball to be played. A lot. But I'm very proud of the boys.
I think that this season has taught me to temper the hot takes.
There were some hot ones early on.
To slow down with the tweets.
Yeah.
And
I was disappointed earlier in the year. I was a grumpy old man. Look, I turned 33 this year. I'm not as young as I used to be. But I was getting grumpy in the beginning, because it was like, these games are hard to watch, and they're getting harder to podcast. And now I'm having a lot of fun. These games have been great. Tonight was, like I said, it was exciting. It had a lot of different emotions went through, and I'm happy that the boys took every punch on the chin, and they kept throwing them. They kept it until they knocked out Detroit. They got it done, and that's the way to fight through everything, because it would have been a shame if Indiana started out great and they blew this one. What would we have said? We would have been like, all right, you know what? Back to reality. Here we go. We're an inconsistent team. They're being consistent. It's great to see.
Absolutely, Facci. Well, real quick before we do sign off here, just want to say Miles Turner, I don't know if you saw his tweet or not yet, but he did tweet a life-size Lego sculpture of himself as Darth Vader that he once put together. and had I gotta find the tweet again. He said, "You played yourself." And that goes back to what Isaiah Stewart said after that Pistons game and said, "You play with Legos." And Miles Turner went on Instagram and said that, Legoland was a location. And then, of course, on this one, tweets a picture of himself as a life-size Darth Vader Lego statue and says, "You played yourself." I mean, good stuff. I'm sure you saw Miles Turner on the Pacers broadcast doing the little chirping hand motion as he was walking to the bench when Isaiah Stewart came in and started chirping. But, it's just really funny to see Miles Turner get worked up like this. I love it. I love seeing a little bit more edge to Turner. I think that more fans would enjoy Turner playing with more edge. But, yeah, good stuff tonight. I think that overall, Beef Stew, there's a reason why the fans got crazy excited when he got ejected from the game. So, he picked the wrong guy to mess with. Thomas Bryant. That's not someone you want to mess with. Just thank goodness the Pacers have Thomas Bryant up there instead of Moses Brown.
Very, very true. Very true. So, love the fire that Thomas Bryant plays with. I know you mentioned, Tom Green's comments. It was funny to just see how, hey, sometimes you can keep your composure, sometimes you can't, but rightfully so. I think it was good that he wasn't just going to get punked like that. Regardless, hey, Detroit, I don't know when we'll see you again. If you make the playoffs, hey, maybe there's a chance, but for now, farewell, little brother. Like I said before, hey, if you never had one, you have the Detroit Pistons now. All right, so feels good being a big brother. But that's all I got. Except you want to give some player awards?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do our Mel Daniels MVP of the game. Has got to go to Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam,
no doubt,
was sensational in this game, and so I think he is most deserving of the player of the game. Now, when it comes to our Jeff Foster Feisty player of the game, who do you think we should give that one to?
McConnell had a couple steals that were really fun to watch. Yeah. He did have some good pickpocketing. He had a good pickpocketed steal.
He had a good half.
Yeah, it was a good first half. He had a steal, I think, that led to a Ben Shepherd 3. He had 3 steals, and I think I don't know if it was all in the first half, but I knew there was a couple. So I was going to say McConnell, but who do you got?
I think it's got to be Ben Shepherd.
Okay. All right.
Had the task of guarding Cade Cunningham for the majority of the night, hit 3 to 4 dagger threes that were just massive when the team needed them, and I felt like he was just here's the thing. We've had a long conversation back and forth, and I want to get your opinion on this soon, but the whole Jarris versus Shepherd thing in terms of who should be in the rotation, who shouldn't be. A lot of Pacer fans say Shepherd didn't earn it. Well, it's tonight, if you watch Shepherd defend Cade versus Jarris had a good game, but I just think Shepherd was better. And so they're very close in terms of where they're at. Obviously, I still think there's way more upside with Jarris. There's no doubt about it. I said that I think he might have the most potential out of anybody on this roster outside of Tyrese and Pascal, if you're looking at full potential and what you need for this team to build. But I just felt like in this game, Facci, Ben Shepherd was unbelievable, and I think we deserve to give him his flowers.
Yeah, no, he would have been kind of an X factor. I feel like his performance was that extra oomph that the Pacers really needed to be able to push ahead. So. And then clutch player, Reggie Miller, clutch player. Like I said, Turner had 8 in the fourth, but that shot, that 3 at the buzzer for Tyrese Haliburton was honestly big. He had basically a buzzer beating 3 in the first half, and then he had that nice, the shimmy over there. That 3 was the dagger in this game. I felt like to put him away. So, who do you want to give it to out of those two? I would say.
I mean, I feel like we have to give it to Tyrese. Tyrese was just too good in this game. I mean, did you say 8 points in the fourth quarter for Miles? I think 3 of those were free throws, so really just 5 points.
Yeah.
One was a big 3, obviously. So, yeah, I'll give it to Tyrese. He hit that big 3 after all the little scuttlebutt that was going on. Then he gave the little shimmy shake, and people got really mad about it. I think it was a nod. It was kind of making fun of Malik Beasley for doing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, Tyrese just having fun. It's WWE night. He was really loving it. I will just say this really quick. If those of you that were in the arena tonight had to see the performance of the fan they picked to pick the 5 out of the 8 people that were former or current, champions in WWE, WWF, the person that they picked, this old lady, what an awful pick. She had no idea. She couldn't even say the names. I'm like, why did they pick her? And she's got Bianca Belair right there next with her. And I forget the other guy that was there tonight.
Montez Ford.
Yeah. So they were both helping her in this. And Bianca Belair is up on the screen as someone to pick. And they were just like, yeah, you got one of them right here helping you. And she's like, oh, I forgot her name. And I'm like, oh, my God, they put that on the screen. That was awful. Yeah. That was the worst fan choice, period.
Maybe pick someone a little bit younger. But yeah, no, it's gonna be a fun weekend. Tyrese,
There
we're
was like
starting-
20 something people that I saw, probably more than that, with Tyrese 317 shirts. Like, ask one of those people to do it. Like, what are we
exactly. Like,
doing?
come on, have some fun, give away some prizes, all that. Tyrese was talking about SmackDown. He's looking to attend that, the Royal Rumble on Sunday. So yeah, he's got an action-packed weekend. I think it was great. Love the WWE Pacer intros early on.
I
That
shared
was
that.
cool. The WrestleMania, 17 Limp Bizkit theme, Rock and Austin in there as they were doing, the starters. I thought that was really cool. Just overall, great day to be a Pacer fan. We pre-recorded an episode earlier this week where we talked about, like, is the Pep going to be in the step after the Detroit game? I can now confirm the Pep is absolutely in the step when you are listening to this next episode and taking it into Friday and the weekend. Just awesome stuff. Bring on Atlanta.
Absolutely, Facci. Well, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find us at on social media. We haven't done that in a while. Let's see if you do
Been a
any good.
long time. You can find Alex on Twitter at Alex Golden NBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Twitter at PacersPod STP. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod STP. And you can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace.
TikTok,
Right?
setting the pace.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. And then Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
You did it. You did pretty good. I'm impressed.
Been a long time.
YouTube.com/setting the pace, a Pacers podcast where you can get all of your video content here from your boys, Michael J. Facci and Alex Golden. And I did get some requests of when is the trades, the fake trades podcast coming out on YouTube. Look, if you really want to listen to it, you got to go to the audio side, but I will release it probably by Friday-ish. Just been pretty busy. Video editing does take a little bit more time. So with that being said, Facci, if you're glad that the Pacers got a victory over the Detroit Pistons, and you hope everybody else has a great Thursday except the city of Detroit and their fans, hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers.